You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast. It's been ages since I've said that phrase, and we're going to get into why I haven't been around or I haven't put out anything since February. I'm joined today by two good friends of mine, Shane Brown and Jaevon Boxhill, and we're going to talk about the theme, or the theme will be captioned "Run for Something." I've been looking, so providentially, I've been looking for a guest host for some time. And it seems like I got Shane now in a position where he'll host this episode and maybe future episodes. I'm hoping. I know he has his own podcast coming up, but we have a lot to share, and I'm honored to be joined by friends of mine. So what I'll do now is just welcome my brothers Shane and Jaevon to the What a Word podcast, episode 1. Welcome, brothers. How are you
doing? Good. Thank you for having me.
Good. So what I'll do at this time is, Shane, I'm going to just turn it over to you, man. And I'll just have you take it away from here.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And congratulations on your 100th episode of What a Word podcast.
Yes. So February was the last time I recorded, and then my life changed after February.
Then your life changed. And we're going to get into some of that. But nonetheless, it's the 100th episode, and
yes.
Podcast has been inspirational, entertaining, informative.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And I know it has a huge following. But I'm just happy that you called me tonight to speak with you and Jaevon on what has been happening. Congratulations, gentlemen. I think what our audience need to know is that I am speaking to two newly elected councilmen. Jaevon Boxhill won a council seat in the city of Mount Vernon, New York. And you, Ryan Sharp, won a seat in the town of Poughkeepsie, New York. And I am elated. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for the people of your region. So what I want to start with, Jaevon. Jaevon, of course, because I live in the city of Mount Vernon. So I'm speaking to my councilman.
That's it.
I'm speaking with my councilman. So, Councilman Boxhill, tell me, how did you come to know about the vacancy or the possibility of running for a seat, and then get into why, after learning of this, you chose to run? So were you invited? Were you thinking about this and then just started to search the internet to see if there's a seat available? Were you hobnobbing at one of these elites, dinners? That's
a good question. There's a lot involved in that. The short is that Lisa Copeland, she's been working in city government for about 20 plus years. She's the outgoing council person, and she's retiring. She's retiring from public service. So that left the vacancy. And Lisa Copeland and we're good friends. This is something that I've been thinking about for a while, because I worked in city government for many years. And so I know how the council works. I worked alongside with them when I was in the controller's office, when I was a deputy controller for the city of Mountain for some years. So I saw a need. I saw a vacancy, and I said, why not? Why wait? This is a perfect time, and it worked out. That's the short story.
That's the short story. So you were previous to Lisa's retirement, you had already mulled over the idea of
certainly. Yeah, it's something that's been in my mind for some time. Yeah.
And what motivates that? What inspires that? What informs that desire to represent the people?
I mean, it's there's a need, right? And you want people in that role who are, professional, but also just very zealous about the community. I lived in Mount Vernon, most of my life. I was born in Jamaica, but I grew up in Mount Vernon. I went to public school, the whole public school system from elementary to high school in Mount Vernon. So that's my roots, and I'm invested in the city. And I mean, that sounds like a campaign slogan, but it happens to be the truth as well.
Yeah.
If you live there, I worked there. After college, after law school, I worked in the city of Mount Vernon. So it's like I feel like you need somebody in these roles that actually really care about the city, and my children are going to public school in the city. So why not, do something or be in a role where you can, navigate the ship, in the right direction. So
Yeah.
that's really the reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome. We're going to come back to you, Jaevon, because I have a number of follow-up questions. But
Sure.
Mr. Sharp, you are now you have now been elected as a council person. Tell me, how did this start? How did you become aware of the seat being vacant, and what motivated you, inspired you to run for this seat?
So my story is a little different because January of 2023, I did not have campaigning or politics or politician or councilman on my bucket list. A friend of mine was running for judge on the Democratic Party line. And he said, Ryan, he sent me a text rather. There's a spot available. Are you or your wife interested? Early one Sunday morning. And I showed my wife the text and I'm like, and then he followed by saying, I don't believe it's time intensive. And I showed my wife and I said, listen, my friend told me about a possible position on the town board. And he says it won't require too much of my time. And my wife was like, okay, what are your thoughts? And I was like, I'd love to do it, man. I'm big on public service, so here we go. And I met with the leaders of the Democratic Party in my area and met the candidate for town supervisor one evening. And it started from there. And what I learned a few things. One, my friend, he was far off the mark in terms of the time investment because it required so much of my time.
Sure.
What it involves, people don't often see behind the scenes. A lot of meetings, a lot of events, door knocking, meeting people, fundraising, house parties. And providentially, I was placed with a group of individuals who were well-versed in politics. So my one-on-ones, my introduction was a lot easier, but I had to sacrifice a lot of time. And as I did it, I thought about the whys and all that. And I can honestly say now, looking back, that it was probably one of the best decisions I made. I am really happy that I chose to run as a councilman. Yeah.
And that's great. Jaevon, I know that you entered a primary before this general process.
Right.
Just talk to me about that. I think you were on a slate in the primary. Yeah. Also.
Correct.
Talk to me about the process. What's involved in becoming a part of a primary, and how did you get on a particular slate, and why that slate or those people?
So the slate, how it comes about, it's actually selected by the district leaders, because Mount Vernon is a fairly large city. I think we have upwards of 80,000 residents. So we have, the separate districts the city's broken up into, and they're actual district leaders, which is also technically an elected position because you run a campaign and you get on the ballot, and the district actually votes you into your role. So each district leader has a vote weighted based on the size of their district. So if you've got 10,000 people in your district, you'll have a heavier vote than somebody who has 5,000 people in their district. So all the district leaders, they come together in a convention. It's normally in January. I think it was postponed this year. And the district leaders basically select who they want to nominate for those positions, which includes the council person and the mayor at the time. So everyone voted, and Derek Thompson and and myself, we got the most votes for councilperson, and he's an incumbent. This is his second term, his second 4-year term, and the mayor is also the incumbent, Sean Patterson Howard, and this is also a second 4-year term. So I'm the new person on the block, and I got some overwhelming support, which was I wouldn't say it was a surprise, but it definitely gave me like a good push and encouragement to to continue the race and say, hey, if these people think that I can do it, then I should be confident to know that I can do this as well. So yeah, that's how it started. The convention. That's how the slate was selected at the Democratic convention from Mount Vernon. So
yeah. No, I remember. I'm trying to remember which date it was where you had the primary. When was that?
I believe it was June. Let's see.
That was in June, right?
June, the exact date. Yeah, it was the end of June. Was the primary?
It was in June, and I went into that booth in Ryan, and I saw Jaevon's name. I had to take out my phone. I mean, I was so proud. I was so excited. Took a little picture, wrote in my ballot, and I had no doubt, frankly, that he was going to win. So how nervous were you for just the primary? Because I think that's where you got most of your competition, really.
Yeah, that's correct. Because Mount Vernon doesn't really have a large Republican
right.
Mount Vernon, so it pretty much the primary is for all the marbles. So whoever wins the primary, generally
yes,
uncontested into the general election. So the question is, how nervous was I? I can't think of a time I was ever more nervous the day of the primary. I mean, I worked. I was at the polling sites. I was everywhere. But when the votes were coming in, when you were clicking refresh on your browser, and I mean, there was times I couldn't press refresh because my fingers were shaking too much, and I turned to my wife, I turned to my dad, he was my campaign manager, and I said, what's the count now? What's the count? And I was up by maybe like 200 votes, and I'm like, that's too close. That's too close, But in the end, I did win by about 1,000 votes or so. So it didn't end up being close. But at the beginning, I'm telling you, those fingers were. Yeah, it was nerve wracking. It definitely was nerve wracking, and because my biggest challenger was someone who was the deputy city clerk. She was Vernon, so she's been in and she's run 2 other times before this, so she had a head start on the door knocking.
Sure.
So yeah, it was a lot of ground to make up. I was a little concerned about that.
Wow.
Ryan, you did not have a primary, to my recollection. Is that correct?
No primary.
So, no primary. So the generals for all the marbles. Just explain to me how I mean, how did you get on the slate? You got on. Why no primaries? And then we can get into the general. But just that process there to be nominated by the party.
So I hope I have the numbers right, but I believe the population of town of Poughkeepsie is maybe about 45,000 people. And then that 45,000 is broken up into different sections or wards, as we call it. Right. So we have 6 wards and then a town supervisor position. So on the town board itself, 7 people. Prior to this election, there were 6 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And my opponent was an incumbent. So when I was approached about running, there was not a lot of people who were like, we're running as well. People who had run before had probably decided they weren't going to run again. So for me, it was more or less similar to Jaevon. The June event was the endorsement from the town of Poughkeepsie Democrats, etc. And I was the man on the ballot. And then all I had to do then was the rest of the groundwork, which included getting signatures to get on the Democratic line and then getting signatures to get on the independent line as well. Because we had a issue that was attractive to independents. We were at points thinking about having a working families party line. but we decided against that, so we declined the line and chose the We Are Town of Poughkeepsie line, which independents had an issue that they were concerned about. And to the end, when we had the election, they were very supportive. Not only them, but the Working Families Party also supported us with votes as well. So that's how I got on the ballot, man. A little less intensive than Jaevon's story, because there was just not a lot of people who were running for Ward 5, the ward I was in. In fact, all the other wards, once somebody indicated an interest, they were running unopposed by any other Democrats.
Mm-hmm. So, Ryan, you talk about earlier about what it takes to run for a seat like a city council.
Mm-hmm.
And as we get there, you speak about, of course, getting that the amount of signatures required to get on the board.
Sure.
Speak about how many signatures you were required.
Mm-hmm.
What process? How intensive was that?
Right.
I'm interested to know how many signatures were required or are required for you to run on the Democratic line and on the independent line. I'm also interested in your perspective on whether or not signatures are a deterrent in the minds of prospective people interested in running. Are signatures now a deterrent? I remember during the COVID period, they basically suspended the signature requirement.
Yeah.
So speak to me about what your experience were with signatures.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the exact numbers that I needed, but I think it was a couple hundred each time. And then there was a point where we had to get volunteers to come in to try to get us up to our numbers, because you went around the first time for the Democratic line, then we went around again for the independent line. And people are apprehensive about opening doors, one, and then people are apprehensive about signing. But once you got in a groove, what I found was sometimes you would hit a home that had maybe a couple voters, or you'd have one voter in the home that was rushing to do something else, so they would sign quickly. But for me, I was not only collecting signatures for myself, I was collecting for the county candidates as well, and other legislative candidates. So they were not only signing one sheet of paper, they were signing like 3 or 4. So I was like, sign here, flip, sign here, flip, sign. So that person who answered the door was signing their signatures a few times. And then to go out and do it again for all the candidates was like, okay, here we are. This is the real deal. So it was a lot of work, and I agree with you, Shane. The signature part, if you're not a person who likes going to strangers, it's a deterrent for sure. And then you couple that with the fact that people are probably a little fearful of signing a document that they haven't read. So some people would press me about what the document itself was stating. Even though it was there in a paragraph, they wanted assurance that I wasn't collecting signatures for the Republican Party, for example, or for some other mission. You know what I mean? So you have to have thick skin, and I knew what the goal was. So on Sundays for me, mostly, those were the days I went out, and then after work, some evenings. But you get through it and you realize that this is not only a part of the process, but it allows you to meet your constituents face to face. So I appreciated it for what it was.
Jaevon, did you have to collect signatures?
Sure, certainly, definitely. I believe the number was about 1,000 signatures that we had to collect. So it was significant. And back to the convention, that's the benefit of being nominated and selected by the Democratic Party, because it's kind of a well-oiled machine when it comes to going out and getting signatures. So, and then when you're grouped with the mayor and another councilman on the same sheet, their signatures are your signatures essentially.
Right.
So, it makes the group effort makes it way easier. So, but it was still a lot of work. We went out almost every day. So after work, 5 o'clock, 5:30, I'm hitting the doors, and we did it. Walked my neighborhood, then walked to other neighborhoods, and it was always an opportunity to get out and meet the voters, and especially for me being a newcomer, that was my early introduction to to the voters. So I definitely took that process very seriously, and I didn't depend entirely, even though I did get a lot of signatures, from the mayor and the incumbent Derek Thompson, but me and my team, we went out as well, daily, and got as many as we can, just so people can say, hey, who are you? What's your name? And I can answer some questions right then and there before we had a chance to vote. So, yeah.
So what was one of the big issues that you think the citizens were concerned with, that you wanted to address in your campaign speech, in your one-on-ones with them? What was one of those driving topics that you knew they were interested in and you wanted to help them solve?
I think that, well, it could prove to be true that a lot of the voters were just concerned about taxes. I mean, the bottom dollar, people don't, people own homes, they pay rent, and they don't want to pay more to live in this community than they're already paying. And rising taxes was a huge concern. And that kind of was my my ace in the hole, as they would say, because I worked in the controller's office. I was a deputy controller. I was in charge of collecting taxes for some time. So I had real answers, and not just, gimmicks or anything, or just to verbiage to appease people. I could really explain to them a plan on how to lower taxes, and this is what we're going to do as a community, and how it could be feasible. So I think that was my advantage, and people, resonated with that, just the financial background and a plan to work towards getting there for the city.
But that's why I voted for you, Jaevon.
I appreciate that. I wasn't gonna ask you if you voted for me or not, but thanks.
That's why I voted, because I need my taxes lower. But Ryan, coming to you, I know that you have there was some unique issues affecting your town
man,
that you were able people to address. Right. So speak to me about some of those unique issues and how you thought, or you think your analysis that helped you get over into the victory column.
Well, similar to what was happening in Mount Vernon, and I must add, by the way, that I'm also an alumni of the high school, graduated in 1990, so lived in Mount Vernon for my formative teenage years, for sure. Right. So I have roots there. So I'm proud to see where Mount Vernon is headed, with leaders like Jaevon and others on the ticket. For me, the issue here was, and I got involved when I learned that we needed a new police station for our policemen, and a new court building for the town of Poughkeepsie Court. And this is a court I've been to because I serve as a public defender in Dutchess County. So I know where they are. And the history of this is about 26 years ago. The people in power locally decided that it was prudent to have them build a building on what we now know is a landfill. And so over the years, that building and that facility has deteriorated. And so the current town board had a plan in place where they were going to move that building to a building not far from where I live. But the estimated cost for that was maybe $50 to $54 million. And when they did the due diligence on what it would cost over time, the payback on a 25-year loan on that would result in about $90 million. So you can just imagine. And I spoke to lay people as a lay person, and I told them I got involved because I didn't want to be priced out of this community, because we learned that paying back this loan would result in a high increase in taxes. And I got involved because of that. And I would tell my constituents that I had no issue with them getting a new station, because I toured the current one. It's in bad condition. But I think we need a town board that's open to ideas and considers the cost of new
Sure.
projects.
Mm.
And I believe that we could, as a community, come up with a better plan where they would have a building that was suitable, but it wouldn't price our seniors out or price people who are on the fringes out. And that was a gift to our team. And not only was it a gift, but we saw what happened when people came together, because people came together and they forced a referendum. And that referendum paused the move from where they are now to the Poughkeepsie Day School, which is not far from me. And that, I think, galvanized Democratic voters, and it galvanized the independent voters as well. So unlike Jaevon, I couldn't speak from the perspective of someone who is versed in finances. But what I was able to tell them that was that I'm a homeowner as well. And my concern, like yours, is to live in a community that's well resourced, but that all people can find it affordable. And so that was my platform essentially. The major item on our platform was keeping costs down and keeping our community well resourced without pricing people out.
And I saw that pitch live. And one of the most moving testimonies was when a lady said that, if the taxes go any further, she has to sell and move. She cannot afford to stay in. Right? She was saying she can barely now afford to stay in this community. It was a very good school district. She's already at her breaking point. And so she was very amenable to hearing a conversation like this, that there is a need for the police station, but we need a better solution. And so when I saw and heard how you spoke with her, I knew already that you touched her, because this is real life for people here. And I think that's one of the important things that I learned right there, that the council person's seat is where real grassroots politics meets the need and the circumstances of the residents. Speak to me about the type of work that you had to put in, knocking on doors. Like, I had a one-day experience with you, but you have been doing this for months and weeks. Speak to me about what that experience was like. Did you have a team? I'm going to ask Jaevon the same thing. Did you have a team who went out with you? Did you split streets? How many doors did you think you knocked on and people you spoke with? How many people, ran you from their porches? How many people invited you for tea? Think about that experience.
So that was challenging, man, because as Jaevon indicated, there's sacrifice, there's time after work, there is your whole weekends, full Sundays knocking. I learned that someone who was successful doing what I did knocked on over 1,000 doors. And I had also been told that I would need about 850 votes to be successful. So with that in mind, I had gone out, and I was going out also against the background of town of Poughkeepsie is not as diverse as the city. I'm going to the homes of people who are racially different than I am, culturally different than I am. When I started out, I wanted to dress up so I wouldn't be threatening, but that backfired in some instances, because as you know, our brothers and sisters who are Jehovah's Witnesses, they go out on Sundays in suits. So sometimes I was going out with my platform and people probably thought I was coming with a religious message. So against that backdrop, I was trying to figure out how I could best meet people without having them ignore the message that I had for them. So it took me some time. So when I started, I went out with people who had done it before. And so I would go out with somebody in the morning, and then I would go out on my own in the afternoon. And then every now and then someone would join me. But people were doing it differently. We had apps, the Van app, which you saw me use, Shane, to kind of get a sense of who had gone where, et cetera. And I was covering the Democrats in my ward. I was covering the independents. I was covering the persuadables. So I would say, man, if I didn't knock 1,000, I came pretty close because I covered a lot of areas in my ward. And what can I say, man? Ultimately, my talking points got a little more refined as I did it more often. And I got a lot more comfortable talking to people, as you could see, Shane. And even the rejections, the people who wouldn't come to the door, or the people who would say, I'm non-committal at this point, that didn't get in the way of the goal after a while because I'd gotten so accustomed to the authenticity of just meeting new people and talking about the platform and trying to connect with their experience in terms of my own journey because it's public service. It's not a coronation. You're actually a public servant. So with that in mind, when I went to doors, I really believed I went to doors with the answer for the concerns of people who I had gone to see.
Yes, Jaevon, tell me about your experience and what it's like to get that vote out.
I don't know how if Ryan, logistically you have the same like walk sheets, a list of registered voters versus people who are regular voters, because all right, so the city of Mount Vernon, 80,000 folks, and we don't have the ward system. So I'm a councilman for the entire city, right? So I can't break it down to say west side, south side, north side, right? It's everyone. And that makes it challenging in itself. So you're not getting to 80,000 doors, that's an impossibility. So we try to narrow it down to the registered voters, obviously the registered Democrats, more specifically, because this is for the primary really. And then even more so, if they voted in the last couple of elections, we can even get that data as well. They're more likely to vote in this election. So that still left you with a list of maybe 10,000 people. So, and you try to just hit as many doors as you possibly can, and we definitely knocked on more than 1,000 doors. Myself personally, and
right.
Obviously in my own district, I've knocked on every door in my district, because that's my district. I'm present there for the district leader run every 2 years. So a lot of them already know me from that. But I went into the projects, the Towers. I walked every single one of those towers, and it was me and my dad. We walked them together, and what what we did was we took the elevator to, I think, what they had, like 10 floors or like something like that, and we took it to the top floor and we walked down. We walked down and knocked on every door. Went to the next building, took it to the top floor, walked down. So it literally it's such a like a humbling experience, though. You meet people from all walks of life, with all different kind of concerns. And I remember there was this guy, he like he said, did he invite you in for tea? And you're in a time crunch, so you can't, you're trying to get your message out, but you don't want to be dismissive of anyone. And some people, they want a little bit more of your time. They have things to tell you, and they want you to listen. And sometimes you have to take the extra time to sit and listen. And a guy sat me and my dad down in his living room right there in Leviston Towers, and he talked to us for about 20 minutes. And I said, listen, call me, take my number, and to be continued. But we sat there and we listened, and people have a lot of knowledge and history of the city of Mount Vernon, and how things used to be, and how they want to see the city. And you can't ignore their perspective, and it can come in to help you once you're starting to govern. So, but yeah, it's a big city, it's a dense city, and it's a lot of walking. And I realized that the rejection part, your family, it's harder on your family than it is on you. I realize, because you go on Facebook and people say negative things about you, and it's like it's not based on any facts, but it's hard for them to read stuff like that. I know I walked with my wife and my girls. Sometimes we walk in my neighborhood, and people, they could be like, oh, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm not into politics, or I'm a Republican. The Democrats are the reason why the city is the way it is. And, you know, they could be really rude, or they can slam the door in your face, or they can tell you some, you know, nasty words. And it's hard on your wife and kids, you know, like, Daddy, like, that man was mean, you know? And I'm like, you know, that's all right, you know, we're just gonna move on and go to the next door. And it's part of the experience. So.
Right. And as you say that, Jaevon, speak to me about what it was like working with your father as your campaign manager. What was he like as a campaign manager? And then what was he still being a father? Of course, you're an adult, but, you know, wanted to see his son succeed. And get more into the support that your family gave you, your wife, your siblings.
Yes. My father has always been involved in politics, even from back at home in Jamaica. You know, I have his brother was elected the Jamaican Football Federation president back in the 90s, actually 20 years before, to almost to the day, the general election this year. He was elected. He beat out, I don't know if you remember, a guy named Captain Burrell. He was owner of the Captain Bakery. He was the prior JFF president. My uncle beat him out early in that election. So my dad has always been involved. My father, I had no interest in politics early on, but he got me involved with the former controller, Maureen Walker. And that was my first taste of politics, where they had us near phone banking, in a room with phones, and here's a list of people you need to call, and this is your script. Tell them. And I'm telling you, maybe if you call 10 people, 9 of them is going to hang up on you, and the other one is saying they're not interested. So, and it can be disheartening, but it was a good taste of what it is to you know, get your foot into politics. But when you're doing it for yourself, I think that it's more sincere. You can have a real conversation with people and a real, you know, engagement, because this is not what someone is telling you to say. This is what you think and what you feel. So, and my father, I think he worked as hard, if not harder than me. You know, he was such a doting, proud father that he was out there saying, you know, this is why you should vote for my son, and he meant every word of it. You know, so yeah, it was a good bonding experience for us. You know, 2 grown men, you know, and just connecting on that level that, you know, we spent a lot of time together, just outside on the road, you know, at events, fundraisers, functions, and honestly, it was good. It was great for our personal relationship, I think. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Ryan, you know, I went up and I followed you and your family to when you were voting in that booth. I took pictures. You know, you and your children, your wife, and that was, I'm sure, was an amazing moment for them. Speak to me about what it was like for your family, to the extent you can speak on behalf of them. How campaigning impacted them, the work-life balance with being this newly minted politician, and the support you got from them as you ran.
I didn't know when I started what it would look like. But as it went on and as we got closer to the election, Nathan, he wanted to know what it entailed. You know, Daddy, what is it exactly you're running for, and what will you be doing as a councilman? And I had to explain the process to him and why I was running. And then he would see the signs with my name on it. He would be going to school as as it got closer, he would tell his teacher, my dad is running for town board, vote for my dad. And by the time we got closer to the election, the whole class had learned. Some parents would text my wife every now and then and say, hey, we see a sharp on a yard sign. Is that your husband? We heard he's running. So he was actively engaged. And the impact on him, I think it'll be unforgettable, this whole experience. The same for my daughter. The impact on children, I think years from now I learned, but that moment when the votes came in and my kids were hugging me, and my wife, who has been supportive from day one, I don't think it's an experience they'll soon forget, because they saw the beginning. They saw me going out. They saw me on Zoom meetings. They saw me leaving to go knock doors. Sometimes my wife came with me when we would be walking our daughter, our youngest, out. She would come and I would knock on doors, I'd ring bells, etc. But the impact of what I committed to and the end result, I don't think they'll soon forget. And I worried, and I may have expressed it to you, Shane, what would have happened had the results gone the other way? How would I have explained the disappointment to my children? You know, how would they have dealt with that? But I won't know the answer because thankfully it really worked out. I mean, it would have been a good lesson in perseverance because I had committed, and I'd expressed that to you, Shane. If this hadn't worked out, I was committed to running again because I saw so much about public service and the redemptive qualities of public service. A lot of people who work behind the scenes, volunteering, knocking on doors, putting up signs, getting the word out. And these people do it at no cost because they're committed to a principle and an ideal that we want to lift up all our fellow men and women, regardless of color, regardless of national origin. And that was what I found beautiful as well about this experience.
Awesome. And you know, one of the things, Ryan, that I noticed, of course, as you said, it is not as diverse as some other cities, and the fact that the city council was predominantly Republican.
Right.
My understanding that you and your entire slate has changed the city council over. It's almost everyone is almost new.
Yeah, 4-3 right now, and one of my colleagues is only losing by 3 votes, with votes still coming in. So we've changed it to blue.
You changed it to blue.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a tremendous victory.
For sure. Nothing short of a miracle, man. And it speaks to the testament of what can happen when people believe. Because that was our concern, as Jaevon expressed. You're giving your message, and people are like, I'm not interested in politics, or I don't think things can change. Right. But we see locally that politics is a zero-sum game, and you can lose an election by a small amount of votes. But I think if you're committed to an idea, like I saw with people will come out, man, and they did. They responded to the call. And as you saw, Shane, even people that morning who didn't know where their polling site was, I was able to say, let me plug it in. This is where you need to go. Because we had some redistricting done here, and people's polling sites had changed since the last election. So it's nothing short of a miracle, man.
Jaevon, speak to me about funding, campaign funding. I know there's a lot of laws. We are all lawyers here. There are rules and regulations, and then of course you got to get the people to give their money. Speak to me about campaign funding. I know you were of course backed by the well-oiled machine of the Democratic Party. What's that?
That's the worst part of it. Raising money, honestly, it's the part I enjoy least of running a campaign. And Mount Vernon is a city that's very involved when it comes to politics. So there's a lot of money raised and a lot of money spent, and it's just to call people up and say, hey, please support me. Send your hard-earned money to my political campaign is a hard swallow for a lot of people, you know. And you know, to say, hey, here's $100, you know, just to help me print these posters or these flyers or send out a mailer or, you know, or pay the volunteers. And you know, I had 2 fundraisers. They were I would say they were successful. I was able to raise a good amount of money to cover all my expenses. So to God be the glory. But yeah, it's a necessary evil of the campaign. You have to raise money because it costs money. It costs a lot of money, and the more citizens you want to reach, the more money you have to spend. So, I mean, when you think about a mailer that's addressed to 10,000 or 15,000 people, just the stamps alone, right? A stamp is 50, 60 cents, right? So you had, you know, $7,000-8,000 just on postage, and then to print the documents and then, you know, design them. You know, you can send out one mailer and it costs you $10,000. You know, it's not a little bit of money, you know. So there's significant costs behind running a campaign, and then you just have to, dot all your I's and cross all your T's as far as your reporting is concerned, because you don't want to mess that up. Anything goes in, it has to be recorded and accounted for. And anything that goes out, same thing. So I had a treasurer, and he stayed on top of that. And we were both rookies when it came to this. So sometimes the Board of Elections for New York State, they make it pretty good. I mean, when they, as far as resources are concerned, as far as learning the campaign laws and the do's and the don'ts. And I had some other folks who were experienced, have ran many campaigns, who were advising me as far as what you can or generally cannot do with campaign money. But it's pretty as long as not something to enrich your own self, it's kind of broad on what you can spend campaign finances on. So
yeah.
Brian,
what was your experience with campaign financing and camp fundraising and?
Oh man, so I benefited from the fact that we ran as a group. We are the town of Poughkeepsie, and so we fundraised together. We had events where we all were a part of it, but people would give to the pot, which included all of us. So I didn't have to do a lot individually. Mind you, I reached out to people, etc. But had I been on my own, I don't know how I would have done it, because people just didn't have a lot to throw around. But what I found was doing it with the group I had, and my experience was a little different than Jaevon's. We had a slate of us who campaigned together and fundraised together, and everything went into one pot. So that helped. But what I did get was the individual acts of kindness. I would be at an event and a couple would come up to me and say, we like you, we like your campaign, we like your sincerity, we want to have a house party for you. And I didn't even know what that was before getting into politics, that people actually open their homes for a candidate, invite other voters over. They take care of the food, and they just have you talk about your platform in the living room. It's informal, but it's so impactful, because you have the opportunity to get up to 10 individuals whose doors you would have knocked, and they're in a living room seeing you. When I did it, I brought, my wife and my baby, and I had 2 house parties the same day for people who hadn't known me for a year. They just saw me as a candidate and volunteered their homes. So my journey was, it was such a blessing in terms of what I benefited from doing it the way I did it. Because had I gone out on my own with my lack of experience, the fundraising would have toppled my campaign because, and then people promise and say, hey man, listen, we're going to send you something. And, you check the ledger and you don't see it, So,
true.
That's why I promised my time, Ryan. I didn't promise money, I promised my time, But I have 3 more questions for you, gentlemen. It's not lost on me that you are both immigrants to the United States of America, but you have taken on what it means service in this country and made this country your own. What impact do you think being an immigrant, if any, Jaevon, what impact does that have on your interest in public service, on your motivation, and does it provide, or did it provide any inspiration?
100% inspiration. I mean, it's the real American dream that you could come here, as an immigrant and be a full participant in the democracy of America, to be elected a leader. And not just that, I mean, if you know anything about the demographics of Mount Vernon, we're all immigrants and we all have something in common. We're all from Mount Vernon. We all lived in Mount Vernon at one time, including Ryan. So Mount Vernon has a very large immigrant, Caribbean specifically, population. And it is only prudent that we have representation of the makeup of our community in government. So it would be a disservice to the people if we had no representation with such a large population of us, hardworking Caribbean folks in the city of Mount Vernon. So I think that void, it's a void that goes unfilled so many election cycles, and not just elected positions, but positions of prominence within our government. We need that representation. We absolutely need. We're a large number in the community, and we should be represented in government, to put it simply.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything Jaevon has said. And I will add this further. It's an extension of who we are. Public speaking skills, soft skills, collaborative leadership. We also learn that in our churches as well. And what we are doing is an extension of what those before us have done. Like Jaevon, I've gone to the churches and I've said, one of the reasons why I'm running is because our church benefited from the work of the civil rights movement. Whether you are lukewarm or averse to politics, we can't deny that because people advocated for all people, we can now check off a box when we feel that there is some discrimination because of our religious beliefs or preferences. We benefited from that because people had gone before and ensured that, coupled with the gains of Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, we could now come under this umbrella and benefit from the work that they had done. So being an immigrant, this is also an extension of our work. We've come to a country that people have made sacrifices before we got here. We came here for a better life, but I think we have a duty also to lift humanity as well through service and public service in particular. I don't think we have the benefit of just sitting idle and watching things take place without getting involved. Because I think as an extension of our service, as immigrants, we have a role to play in lifting our country to its best ideals as well.
That's beautiful. And to follow that, then, what would be your advice, Ryan, starting with you, to someone interested in public service, someone interested in public office more specifically, as a democracy demands the involvement of its citizens? What is your advice? Having come out of this experience, what is your advice?
Well, it's a good question, because what I have found is that there are opportunities that come up all the time for those who are seeking an office. There's a website, Run for Something. I think it's runforsomething.org. I'll put it in the chat, where you can put in your information and where you live, and it will tell you what's available. And that's just one aspect of the political system, that there is something you can do in terms of your candidacy. But there's also a number of other ways you can get involved. We mentioned a whole host of volunteering opportunities, the behind the scenes, hosting parties for candidates you believe in, fundraising. No amount too small is what I would always say. But my hope is that because I ran, Jaevon ran as well, that somebody else looks on and says, you know what? This is something that I can do as an extension of public service. I'm hoping that my journey has encouraged someone to participate more in the process. Run for something, run for an office, whether it's a school board, whether it's the town board, whether it's the planning board, run for something, get involved locally. And if there's not an opportunity, because what Jaevon described in terms of the competitive nature of his city, then find other ways that you can get involved. For me, it was inviting other candidates to my own church. That was a way I said, you can get your message before a larger audience. There's so much we can do, and I'm hoping that my journey with all the hiccups and even with the success of getting the success at the with the election itself will inspire others to get involved in some capacity and reach out to individuals like Shane, Jaevon, and myself if you want to get our story and get our experience about what it was like running. And one of the promises I've even made to myself is the connections I developed knocking on doors. You heard me, Shane. I told a few people I'll be back. And the churches, I plan to visit a whole host of churches in the upcoming months just to connect more with my constituents. Meet them where they are, and build relationships. Go to the sporting events, go where people are, go where the needs are, and listen to the concerns of people and help to problem solve.
Yeah.
Yes, Jaevon. What because I know Jaevon goes to all the events. I mean, if many of us who follow him on Facebook, that if there's an event in Mount Vernon, he's there. He's very present and visible. But so Jaevon, what's your advice to those of us who are interested in participating in elected office?
Well, I feel like Ryan and I, even though our stories are similar, our paths to get there were very different. I feel like I did it the more traditional way, like kind of work your way up, almost pay your dues, like phone banking to district leader to volunteering within the party, and then the party pushed you forward. That's like the long route. And Ryan said, "Hey, there's a void to be filled, and I'm your guy." And the people rallied behind him, as a newcomer. So there's different pathways for different folks, and no way is the wrong way or the right way, But I think once you decide you're going to do it, you just be yourself, The people want you, authentic you, and that sounds as cliche as it comes, but it's so true, And I think that resonated with a lot of voters. A lot of times, even people who were supporting my opponent, in the primary, they pulled me aside and they said, I'm supporting X guy, but meeting you is somebody that I would get behind any other time, and that was good enough for me, because you're not going to get everyone's vote, but they said I'm not voting for you, but I still like you, and that means a lot, So be yourself. And Ryan touched on a little bit about the church. Growing up in the Adventist church, we were always kind of anti-politics, or we kept our distance from the world. But I mean, there were many great leaders in the Bible, and I believe God had His hand in that. And I'm not wouldn't compare myself to any of those folks, but God always plays a part in our government, And again, it's similar to the Caribbean representation. We want people in position that mimic or mirror our values and our ideals, and it's important. And I'll just tell you, and I told this story at Mount Vernon SDA Church about Pastor Laguerre, who was the former pastor, right, of Mount Vernon SDA, when I was in the controller's office. And I have sat with every pastor or minister in the city of Mount Vernon, and it's not a knock on anyone, but I remember he came in there. He wanted to discuss some property that he could possibly purchase on behalf of the church that we were selling at auction. And we sat down, me and the controller. And at the end, he said, "Let us join hands for prayer." And that was the first time that I had ever had a prayer session in the controller's office at our conference table. And it was the Seventh-day Adventist man. And this is why it's important, to have people who mirror your beliefs within government. I think it's important. It's definitely important. And I'm not perfect, but I would hope to represent us well as proud Seventh-day Adventist folks within an elected seat. So that's the long story. Yeah.
I mean, but I am inspired by those by run and be yourself, including representing the values that and people wanted to see the values that we share in common. My last question, when I went up to Poughkeepsie, I was driving around. In fact, no, Ryan was driving, and I was sitting beside him, and he gave me some flyers, and I walked behind him, and he was dressed down. I came in a suit, Jaevon, because I thought this is what politicians do. I didn't want my friend to look bad, but he was dressed down. I had a nice suit, and we're knocking on doors, and I observed. I didn't do much of the speaking, I observed. And at the end of it, I said to myself, Ryan is going to win.
Yes.
Because what I learned, Ryan, was that there's something about putting in the work. And what I learned from you is that you put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you understand to me how inspirational that was. You put in the work. And I said to myself, God is going to bless you because you put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that. I learned that from my own life. I learned that for myself. I was reminded of what it takes. What lessons did you learn in this journey? What was prominent in your mind? And at the end of it, you said, you know what? I'm going to take this for myself. What did you learn, Ryan, from this journey?
Well, I learned that God can do anything, man, because while the demographics are shifting in the town of Poughkeepsie, I could not have won if only my people voted for me. I needed the allies. I needed people who look differently to vote for me. In fact, Shane saw one example where the gentleman indicated that he was a Republican and his daughter, who I'd come to see, was the Democrat. But he says, we have a party that is taking away rights. So, and I think he says, when you win, fight for my daughter. So there's this idea that I was not running just for myself. I was running for the unheard, people who were concerned about the direction the country was going in. And putting in the work was just the faith part of it for me. Because honestly, I was in a bubble in a sense. I didn't have pollings. I didn't know how I was doing. And I didn't know whether people would vote for someone who wasn't raised in the town of Poughkeepsie. I'm an immigrant. I'm a person of color. I'm a male person of color. I didn't know how that was going to play out. But I went at it because I was committed to the task. And I thought to myself, you know what? People have done it before. And they've, like you said, Shane, they put in the work. And many of my colleagues who were running put in a lot of work, a lot of weekends, and it didn't turn out the way that they wanted it to. But I was committed to giving it my all, laying it all on the court so that I couldn't say at the end of the day, man, with this opportunity, one, I was running with a group. I didn't have to fundraise. I had all the benefits of seeing people who had the experience, who mentored me. This, in my mind, was my opportunity to give it my all. And I'm so thankful that it played out. The lesson above it all is, man, if you have a dream, you have a desire, God can do more than you can ask or think. When my name was announced, and I'm so happy, Shane, you were able to capture it, I was blown away because I had no idea going in that victory was assured. The only thing I had control over, to an extent, was the work I could put in. And I'm so thankful that people responded. And this kid from Kingston, Jamaica, who used to play barefoot on the streets, is now a councilman in an area in the town of Poughkeepsie where I just moved a couple of years ago. God can do anything.
Anything.
Jaevon, what did you learn?
I learned a lot of things. I think to isolate one, like Ryan was saying about like God can do anything, and I feel that, like, generally speaking, I'm a confident individual. I'm confident at work, still humble, but this task I didn't, the amount of support, just putting yourself out there and just, doing the work, the way people rallied behind me, I didn't imagine it. I couldn't imagine the love and support. I mean, the entire community came out, and people from different facets of politics, even the people who weren't supporting folks on my ticket, they still supported me, and it meant a lot. People who weren't going to certain people's fundraisers, they came to support my fundraiser, and it was like, as for somebody, a newcomer, and first time in politics, in an elected race, it was it was like mind-blowing and humbling and just encouraging, and I just kind of want to keep that same momentum going into government, where that I'm not going to govern for just my supporters or my so-called supporters, but a united city, because if we are united, we could be a powerful powerhouse on the county stage and the state. The city of Mount Vernon can be a real powerhouse when it comes to, being a mover and shaker for the state. So, and that's what I want to see, because it was at one time, and that's where I want to get back to.
Awesome. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for your sacrifice, for your commitment. I don't think it's lost on everyone that not only are you intelligent young men and with a vision for your life, you love people, you love the communities where you live. So I want to thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Also want to thank you, Ryan, for having me join in this conversation.
Yeah, man, and host, as you will be hosting a few more in the future.
I feel honored to be part of the 100th episode. This is a milestone.
Yeah, man, end of season 2 too, man. I've had the last episode for the season just in a queue forever, and I didn't know what would be the end of season 2, and
Nice.
But this was special, and I can't say enough about the support. Jaevon touched on it. My community, people who learned I was running, people who couldn't vote for me but had my signs in their yard because they were in a different ward, and just generally speaking, man, just the to see how the party rallied around me. And like Jaevon says, I won't only be serving people who voted for me. My public service, the goal is to help even the people who didn't vote for me, or the people who couldn't vote. We all want to see our communities be lifted higher, and we want to impact lives in the best way possible.
For sure. So Ryan, you said you walked around dressed down.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, jeans, sometimes a sweatshirt. I had my name tag. I had a bag with the palm cards, because I was doing the sports jacket slacks. But man, I believe a couple of those homes, they really thought, I was Jehovah's Witness, so they didn't open the door. So it's a catch-22 too, because at the same time, I'm like, I'm a person of color. How do I finesse this? But I found that people, they were curious, because I had the bag. Maybe they thought I was selling a product. Sometimes Shane experienced this. Some people would say, fellas, I don't have any money, and they would laugh. So they didn't know, they didn't have any idea. And then, but you had the opportunity to make the pitch. So I don't know, man. I don't know whether it impacted me any, but some people suggested that I dress down because it would make me more relatable. But it was always in the back of my mind. And while I'm being relatable, I'm also a man of color, which, that has its own issue when you dress down, so.
Correct. And I think I was conscious of that. And I felt that I took the other avenue where, I think I dressed down one day, and I thought I got the least door openings the time when I was in jeans. And, and maybe because I'm a little younger and, me dressed down, I might start, appear to appeal to some stereotypes. So it's like, I'm professional every day. So why not just be professional? This is me every day. This is not me dressing up. This is how I go to work, every day. So I just left work and just kept on my tie. So,
yeah.
And sometimes people like that, People like to see, a young man who looks professional and, you know.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I've been to so many events, man, when I thought suit and a tie and a jacket was, what was appropriate. And I looked
Right.
around me.
And you're the only one.
Everybody, I was the only one dressed up, man.
Mhm.
Everyone else is in jeans and sometimes a t-shirt.
Mhm.
And it's just culturally, it's something I'm learning to finesse around.
Right. The Dominican is different. I think
Yeah.
Mount Vernon is, predominantly Afro and Caribbean. And
Sure.
I think there are certain expectations. I think within the type of culture environment that Ryan works in, that is just not. When we went to the watch night or to the election night,
Mhm.
I am the only one, maybe two guys had on a suit. Everyone else, including the guy who was running for county, what is it, supervisor? What's the term for that?
Oh, the county executive.
Even the county executive was
that's a big position.
Yeah, and he was dressed down.
Right.
He was dressed down. So I think it's just a matter of understanding where you are. What works in your community, what works in your environment. I think Westchester County is also very different. It's a very affluent county. The expectations are just different down here in Westchester.
There's some truth to that. I believe that. Yeah.
So I also have to thank people from the churches too who rallied behind me, even though it's not something we see a lot. We don't see a lot of our people in politics like that. There's another brother in the DMV who I believe is running for senator, Marcellus Cruz. And I plan to speak with him at some point because I love to see it, man. I love to see that we're giving, we're presenting these images of young men and women who are engaged in the political process. I love it. I love it.
I spoke or visited so many Sunday churches, dozens of Sunday churches. Sometimes and I went with the mayor and the other councilperson, but we would have a schedule where we would visit 3-4 churches on a Sunday, and what stood out to me the most was Pastor Stephen Pogue of Greater Centennial Church. He has a huge church over there, Mount Vernon. The Sunday before the first Sunday of early voting, he committed to bringing his congregation to the polls because this is to show you that they're different, divergent belief, on the importance of voting, and I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but the importance of casting your vote and, having a say in who you want to govern you, and he's a strong believer in that. And he made sure that he didn't push any particular candidate. He had all of us, as well as our opponents, speak at the church. And he didn't say who you should vote for, but he said, we're all going to go on and vote together, though. We're all going to vote. So,
and there's that understanding from him of what it costs, what the power to vote costs people of color.
I thought it was powerful. It was powerful. I can never forget that, growing up in Adventist church and hearing his view on it, and it was powerful.
But I think, again, as you said, Jaevon, the sort of representation matters line works here. Because I think, especially for generations to come, and certainly currently, when you have, when you of course, you and Ryan ran, and then my guy name again, ran for Judge Williams.
Maurice. Yes. The Honorable Maurice Williams.
The Honorable Maurice Williams, who ran for Circuit Court. And I think when you have that sort of continuously, you're hearing, listen, your people are running, your people are running, your people are running. I think now we can have a better conversations with ourselves about the importance of voting, the importance of running, why these issues affect us and how it affects us, how it affects the regular members in the church, right? especially on the local level.
Mhm.
We can't these positions. We can't ignore what a judge does in family court or in landlord tenant court, right? Right? We can't ignore what's happening when our city councils are voting, what our mayor does. We love to invite them on Community Guest Day to accept the plaque. When the real meat, where substantively what we need is to continuously have conversations with our leaders and then position people to run.
Right. Right.
And I think more than ever, I think it ought to be clear to people. I want to be very careful what I've said, but it ought to be very clear to people that if you don't position your people, other people position their people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna just touch on that real quick. When you said other people, I have been doing the city's budget and now the county's budget, and there's so much money that's allocated for social services in our community. And as a church, we are not just preaching. We shouldn't be just preaching to each other, right? We are a hospital, to bring in winning souls and healing the sick and all their other ailments, would be mental, substance abuse, re-entry, staying in from the, time in jail and prison and stuff. And money is allocated and it's often sent to churches, but we can't take a stance that, hey, we're not involved in we don't get involved with government when our brothers in the Sunday church have a robust re-entry program, when a lot of our members are children, are in and out of jail, and we don't talk about it, but what they need these services, and it's available to us, but we need to know somebody on the other end of the phone to say, hey, Ryan, how can you help our program? How can you help our soup kitchen? How can you put some money, some teeth behind these programs? Because we want to help some people. And that's the role of the church. And we cannot be so separate that, because it's impossible, to be in the community and separate yourself from government.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We may need a part 2.
Discussion altogether.
But one of the things we can do is maybe, at the end of next quarter, we come back and we'll tap into the journey now that we are on the board and we are serving in public office. And, people are going to want to know where or how things are going, and, the journey continues, man. So for sure, Shane, we probably have to schedule and set up a time to meet again, maybe after the first quarter of next year when things are in swing. Yeah.
Problem.
But thank you, brothers, man. I appreciate this. This is a perfect way to cap off episode 100, the end of season 2 of the What a Word podcast. I want to thank my brother Shane Brown for hosting, and I want to thank Jaevon Boxhill, newly minted city council member in Mount Vernon, the city of Mount Vernon. We want to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us, and we hope that what we shared will inspire you to do something you've never done before, knowing that God can do anything. And it's a journey, but listen, I've seen it firsthand that if you step out on faith, powerful things can happen. Awesome. Blessings, brothers, and we'll keep in touch for sure, man.
Definitely.
All right, Jaevon. Cool. All right.